Do you find yourself feeling guilty or even ashamed of your anger? Or maybe you have people telling you not to get so upset or just calm down? Unfortunately, this is not uncommon for women. The problem is our rage, our anger is valid and necessary. It sends us the message that something isn't okay and encourages us to take action to address it. But most so called anger management programs are ineffective at best and harmful, even at times. So, in this episode, we'll dive into the problems people have with anger and why they struggle with it, what anger is and how it helps us. And I'll share my process to effectively work with your anger so it doesn't plague you. At the end, I'll share about how to help with an opportunity for nervous system regulation. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. So, we're going to dig into anger and rage today, and I want to just say I feel like I'm treading in rough waters or traveling on thin ice with this, only because in the past, when I've talked about anger, including when I was teaching a yoga class and my little Dharma talk at the beginning was about how do we work with anger inside of our yoga practice, right? Someone was like, Jen has a rage problem. And I wasn't even mad when I was talking about it. I was just talking about how anger is an appropriate emotion. So I know that this is a controversial topic that should not even be controversial. So if you're here, I hope you're here with an open mind and open heart and ready for some support around anger because anger's not bad. And hopefully that'll be the resounding message or the message you completely and repeatedly get from me throughout this podcast. But a lot of times for us women, we have been taught or told or socialized to believe that our anger is bad, that we're not allowed to have it, and that it's okay for boys and men. But women, if we have an anger problem, there's something wrong with us. And I will tell you, with me and all my Gen X friends going through perimenopause, there is plenty of anger, and it is rightful anger. So I want to have this conversation because I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I feel really comfortable when I do feel angry to acknowledge it and work through it and use it for the purpose it's there. But before we get into that, before we get on into what to do with anger and rage, I really want to talk about first, this is important now more than ever. A lot of people are experiencing a lot of anger right now, especially in the United States, but probably all over the world. There are a lot of not great things happening that are outside of our control. Maybe for many of us Americans, the first time we've experienced this in our life. And so perhaps we're feeling angry. I know I had an intense couple days, maybe 3 days of anger this week when I watched my 401k that I've been saving since I was 22 drop by 25%. I was like, shit, I'm pissed now. Not that I wasn't pissed, that was also watching other people who are clients of mine in my other business, my therapy business, struggle to know how they're going to pay rent and eat, right? So I was also very pissed about that. So, and just because some of their benefits were cut. So anyway, now more than ever, we need to figure out how to work with this emotion. And it's tricky because first, before we get into that, I want to talk about why it's so tricky. A lot of us women were socialized as girls, whether verbally or through nonverbals or through conversations that we didn't really hear, but were clearly the expectations were known, that we were supposed to, quote unquote, play nice. And playing nice meant playing quietly and without conflict. without bothering the parents. And this is actually well documented. I remember, I think it's Rosalind Wiseman's book, Queen Bees and Wannabes. Either that or it's The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander. I think it's the Queen Bees and Wannabes book. Back when I was a school social worker, we were reading that to read about relational aggression in girls. And it very much talked about how we were taught to play nice. And as a result, because we didn't learn how to appropriately express our anger and be able to learn how to work through anger and work through conflict, there was a lot of relational aggression. I shouldn't even say was. There is a lot of relational aggression that happens amongst girls, especially in late elementary school, middle school, and through high school. And so this socialization of girls to not be able to access and work through anger and conflict is really problematic in a lot of ways, because this extends well beyond high school for some, including into college and into the workplaces. If you've ever felt there's a queen bee or a female bully and it's all relational aggression, this socialization to not have access to anger and healthy anger and healthy conflict is a significant contributor. And we'll talk more about the challenges. However, that is one piece of it. So a lot of us are socialized to just play nice and then never learned that anger is healthy and okay, and there's a way to work through it, and conflict is healthy and okay, and there's a way to do it that can be productive. So another piece is that, I don't know about you, but growing up with just me and my sister, it was very clear that anger was not allowed from us. And now, granted, we didn't have a brother to see that he was allowed to feel angry, but I certainly had friends who had both boys and girls in the family, and somehow the boys were allowed to feel anger. It was just kind of expected, and no one got all that upset about it. But us girls were not. Like, it was a clear contrast. And even when we as girls watched the adults around us, when women got angry, they were labeled a bitch or, oh, she's so difficult, whatever the language was. But it was definitely there. And in a lot of times, it was rightful anger. When I think about the times that some of the women I knew, I'll just say it that way, in my life growing up felt angry and expressed it, they had every right to be. Perhaps at the man they were expressing it at. So I'll just say that. But a lot of times they got this label that they were being a bitch or were bitchy or had an anger problem when all they were doing was expressing a healthy emotion in as healthy a way they knew how, not having learned how to appropriately express anger because of how they were socialized. The boomers definitely, they got even less than us Gen Xers in terms of feeling acknowledgement. So we're making progress, but definitely there's challenges as we get older, and we're the older adults now that still are trying to work through some of this stuff. So as you can see, it stems from very old messages. The other thing is, a lot of times as we grew up in high school, college, and got out of college, it was very clear to us as women that we had to, quote unquote, behave, that we had to watch our tongues and say the right thing. And people pleasing, at least growing up, Gen X was like essentially encouraged. At least it felt like to me. Most people I knew were people pleasers. There were the few who weren't, but they were usually like, oh, I don't know, she kind of is out of control. But when I look back, I'm like, oh, the person they called out of control just freely expressed their emotions, including anger, which was valid. So I understand that this can be something that upsets people when we talk about this, but the reality is a lot of us women were not taught as girls that anger was even okay, let alone how to work through it and how to also have healthy conflict. The other thing I want to say is it's not just men who have a problem with women's anger. In fact, the comment card that I got teaching that yoga class, there was only one comment card and there was like 50 people in the class, so there's always one, but it was from a woman. And a lot of times it's women silencing other women. It's women who struggle seeing women stand in their power. And I'm not saying power over, but I'm just saying our internal power to be able to express ourselves and speak truth to bullshit about what's actually going on. The other thing I'll say is many women fear their own anger, which again, with what I just said, if you think about that, if you never learned how to deal with something, of course it would be frightening, especially when it's something that can feel so intense as anger and even rage. So it's important to have grace for yourself around these experiences or feelings you have about anger. You're not bad or wrong if you think anger is bad. Well, I mean, you're probably wrong actually, but you're not bad. It's not a moral judgment if you think anger is bad. It's just that I want to talk about why we actually need healthy anger. So, because the thing is, anger and rage are actually necessary. And when we squash them, that only leads to bigger outbursts later, right? Like holding a beach ball underwater. You hold it down for a while, it's a lot of work, but then eventually it breaches the surface in the form of a water explosion, which is kind of what happens with anger. And if it doesn't go out externally, it goes internally in the form of depression or chronic illness. So a lot of times women have these strange chronic illnesses or off the beaten path autoimmune disorders, right? Things that we think are rare, but are actually somewhat common in women when you work with women who have histories of not having a voice, not being able to appropriately express their anger or really any feelings whatsoever. So I want to talk about this because that's not a healthy way to deal with anger. Pushing it down is not effective. And hopefully by now at this point in your life you realize that. Either hopefully you don't have one of the illnesses I talked about. That would be really unfortunate, but you might. But perhaps at a minimum, you've seen yourself just explode and you're like, oh my God, I'm out of control. When reality is, well, you haven't been working with your anger along the way. And so you've been holding it in, holding it in, holding it in. And then what else is it going to do? It's going to explode. So it's valid if you're in that situation. And I hope that discomfort or pain around that is what's motivating you to stay here and join this conversation. So, the first part of this conversation is acknowledging that our anger, our rage, and really all feelings are just neurobiological experiences or responses, rather, to what's going on for us, both in the external world as well as internally for us. And these neurobiological responses that we call emotions give us information about our experience of what's happening. So to me, I think of it like parts going, yoo-hoo, this thing here, and then whatever feeling it is. So let's say that you had the most fun doing something and you're laughing and you're feeling joyful. That feeling of joy is a part of you inside saying, yoo-hoo, do this more. That was fantastic. Whereas when you're feeling rageful or angry, that's a part of you saying, yoo-hoo, this thing is not okay. Do something. Right? And if it's anger, it's like, do something. If it's rage, it's like, do something effing now. So it's really messages from parts of us inside of ourselves that are just trying to help us. So when we can contextualize anger and rage in this way, then instead of being scared of it, we can lean in and get curious about it. We can try and understand what's going on. But the problem is most anger management, and I use air quotes with that, most anger management programs and classes are more interested on controlling the anger and keeping it under wraps. But that doesn't make any sense. That's a top-down approach. Like you're trying to think your way through your anger instead of working with them and through them. So it's kind of like holding that beach ball underwater, or more likely, like telling a baby they can't cry because they're hungry. Stop crying. But they're crying because they're hungry. So then you give them food. So it doesn't make any sense to be like, it doesn't make sense that you're crying. You need to control your crying. But you would never know they were hungry if they didn't cry. So you get the idea. So this anger has a message. Rage has a message. And so it's important that you take the time to pause, give yourself some space and lean in and get curious. What is the message? What is the concern that a part of you has? And the concern is often about some kind of violation, whether that's a violation like, I don't know, at the global or national level, like someone effing around with tariffs so they destroy our economy and the world economy, or if it's anger about something someone said to us or didn't do. Like maybe I think I have a not I think, I have a lot of clients who have spouses that maybe I would say don't participate with any level of equity in the home. And so one thing I'm thinking about is the anger that comes up when that's happening. And then the female partner, if it's a heterosexual couple, is exhausted and the male partner doesn't understand why they're so exhausted. Like that anger is valid. That anger is like, yoo-hoo, this is inequitable. You need to do something about this. This isn't sustainable long term. Certainly not for this relationship, but also not for your own personal well being and happiness. So it could be anger about that. It could be anger inside. You could have anger at yourself for not doing something effectively. Today, I had this big plan of organizing my tasks. I'm reading, what is it? 10x is easier than 2x, whatever that book is. I'm reading that and have felt like my to-do list has gotten out of control over the last few weeks, especially because I had a vacation in there and was just trying to get stuff done, hanging on. And now I'm like, why do I have all this shit on in my AccuFlow, which is the app I use to to track my tasks. And I was thinking to myself, I've got to figure out a way to pare this down. This is ridiculous. This is not sustainable. I've got to sit back and take my own advice and prioritize. And while that's important, I even had a focus mate session where I was going to work on it. I didn't work on it. Instead, I got distracted, shifting my audience a little bit from only ADHD women entrepreneurs to really professional ADHD women, women who may be entrepreneurs, maybe in a career. So I got really hyper focused on that, shifting my upcoming book for that, right? And so I have a part of me inside that's kind of mad at myself for not doing the thing that I need to do. Even though that shift is important, it might have been able to wait. So, right, it could be that internal anger that you're having when maybe you're not having a productive day or you're not using your time wisely or you're being ineffective. So anger can come from a lot of places, but you're not going to be able to control it. I'm just going to tell you that right now. You cannot control anger, but rather anger softens when you lean in and get curious and you say, what's the concern? What's going on? And this takes less time as you practice doing this. I've been working with anger for a very long time. I started therapy when I was around 24, 25. I'm 51, so I've been in and out of therapy for a long time. Plus, my other business, I'm a therapist myself. So I've got a lot of practice of working with anger. So now I can just be like, oh, I'm feeling pissed. What's going on? I'm like, oh, that's it. And I can work through it. Now, I will tell you, sometimes the anger takes longer. Over the weekend and beginning of the week, I was incredibly pissed off about what's going on in the United States right now. And I worked through the feelings. I was like, I got to take some action because a lot of times that's what anger is about. It's about setting boundaries. For me, with my day today, it's about saying, okay, this wasn't my first choice of how I would have spent my day, but this is what happened. Being angry isn't going to change it. So now what am I going to do to shift to make the rest of this day productive? As far as what's going on in the United States, 3 nights, I wrote anywhere between 5 and 7 letters to my representatives with a couple phone calls in there as well about that many different topics and just expressing my extreme frustration and desire for them to actually do something. So that action, in addition to validating the feelings and understanding them, helped me say, okay, you're doing what you can. I wasn't able to go to the protest over the weekend. I wanted to, or rally, I should say. It was not able to with other things in my schedule, but I at least wanted to do something. And that helped calm my anger. I'm not completely calm because there's still a lot of things that aren't okay. So it's not going to make your anger go away, but it's going to help you be able to work with it more effectively instead of it coming out sideways or at inopportune times. So just to kind of summarize, because that was kind of messy, when you notice yourself feeling angry, and let me pause there, like what might tell you you're feeling angry? I notice my face. I can get a very serious pissed off face, and it's different from my focus face, which apparently looks like I'm pissed off. I learned that when I was in 10th grade, that when I'm reading and focusing, I look really mad, but I'm not. I'm just concentrating. But I can look really pissed. And so sometimes if I catch a glimpse of my face, I'm like, holy moly, what's going on? Or if I'm clenching my teeth, or my heart rate is increased, or if I'm tensing everything in my body. Yeah, I don't know if this ever happens to you when you're driving and all of a sudden you realize you're clenching your butt, like, or clenching your fists on the wheel, and it's not bad traffic. So when you catch yourself doing those kind of things, and for you, it might be entirely different. Sometimes I might feel more heat in my body. I might feel more animated. I might find myself info dumping in ways that I'm kind of ranting. And so sometimes it's not until someone looks at me like, okay, that was intense, that I catch that I was doing it. Or if it's over the phone, a long pause. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." Then that doesn't mean I need to hide my anger. That doesn't mean I should be ashamed of my anger. It means that I need to work through my anger. And if I dumped it all over someone else, I can say, "Oh, you know what? I'm feeling really angry. And while I'm not gonna apologize for my anger, I'm apologized in the way I dumped it on you." Because those are 2 different things. But notice what tells you that you're feeling angry. The anger is not bad, just notice it. The rage isn't bad, notice it. And then lean in, be curious. What is this anger about? What's the message from the anger? What in what way have you been violated that you're pissed off about? In what ways do you need to speak up for yourself, communicate boundaries, or advocate for yourself and others that you care about? Oftentimes, when you can work through the feelings, validate that it makes sense that you're there, and then take action, even if it's the smallest action, even if it seems like a small action, but the biggest action you can take, that's going to help. And again, remember, it's not about stomping out your anger. It's not about never feeling angry. Angry is a healthy emotion, but about learning how to work with it, how to be in a shared space with anger when it comes up. This is so important now because there's a lot of things happening that is out of our control, especially if you're in the States. But I know what our president is doing here, what the administration is doing, what other people whose names I don't even want to put on my podcast are doing is impacting other people in the world. And so there's a lot of people angry right now. Not to mention, we all have this collective trauma history because epigenetics goes back up to 12 generations. So when you think about how many hundreds of years that goes back, we're talking Native American genocide, we're talking slavery, and that's just what happened in the US, Revolutionary War, all that kind of stuff. So we all have these nervous systems that are so focused on protecting us from threat. And sure, not all of us had maybe trauma in our family experiences to the same degree, but a lot of us have this shared history of the world. And certainly people who are in Black and brown bodies have racial trauma, generational racial trauma, things like that. So it's important to recognize that the anger might also be bigger because of that past trauma. So sometimes when you're working with it, if you notice it just feels too big and you're like, holy moly, that would be a good time to find someone to work with who actually understands anger, not an anger management class. That crap is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. I've been in this mental health field for 25 years and never have I seen it work for anyone because it doesn't actually address the real problem. It's just like, oh, stop feeling your anger. Just don't drink anymore. Okay. Yeah. Because Gabor Mate talked about this actually in a keynote I attended in 2016 for the EMDRIA conference, the National EMDR conference, through the organization that holds the certifications and the body that monitors the trainings of clinicians. I should think that's how you'd call it. Anyway, I was at that training and Gabor Mate actually talked about how a lot of times people go about addiction wrong. And I know I'm a little bit off the rails, but I'm going to loop it back to anger here in a moment. He said a lot of times with addiction, we say, just say no. Just say no. And if you think about someone who has a food addiction where perhaps they have a binge eating disorder, but as a kid, they had a horrible home life. And the only time they felt love and nurturing was in their grandma's house when she would bake them cookies. And now they can't stop eating the cookies. And they maybe have other issues coming up for them because they've gained weight or whatever. And now abstinence programs are saying just say no to the only kind of love and nurturing. I'm not saying that you continue to do that behavior forever, that you keep binging on cookies. But what's important to understand is it's not that simple. There's something beneath it that needs to be worked through because that cookie represents more than the cookie. So it's first about working through the trauma, working through the needs that weren't met so that you no longer need the cookie to meet those needs. Likewise with anger, sometimes our anger, if we had a relatively decent growing up experience, we may have anger that's more, I don't even like the word normal range, but it might not be as big or intense. But if we grew up with racial trauma, in experiencing racial trauma, if we grew up with class-related trauma or trauma from our own family of origin or intergenerational trauma, any of that, our anger likely served to protect us, or keeping it quiet served to protect us for some, especially girls. And so sometimes it's not as simple as just quash your anger or just work with your anger. Sometimes it requires more in-depth work, and that work cannot be done with someone who is hell-bent on making you not feel your anger. So if what I share today you're working with and you're like, gosh, I just can't do it, I highly recommend you seek out a mental health therapist, a licensed therapist, or a very experienced coach with mental health experiences like myself who can help you work through those layers of what is really beneath the anger. Because a lot of times, if it's not resolved by working through it like I just shared, there's other things that are fueling it. Okay, so this was intense. I fully expect I'm going to get a comment that with someone that tells me I have an anger problem, which is hilarious because I so don't. But I will tell you, I allow myself to feel my healthy anger and I allow myself to speak out on behalf of the anger I'm feeling. And I try to do it after I've had some time to pause and reflect so that I'm being as effective with it as possible. And that's my hope of what you'll get out of our time together today. So if you found this helpful in any way, I would just love it if you would share this episode and comment. Or if you're watching or listening to this, I should say, on YouTube, subscribe to my channel. And also, I want to say part of working with anger can be about regulating your nervous system. And I've got another challenge coming up in the month of May. It's a 28-day challenge to regulate your nervous system with ADHD. And when we regulate our nervous system, not only are we able to focus better and be more motivated to get the right things done that we need to do, we're also better equipped to work with big feelings like anger and rage. So I strongly recommend you do it. It's $90.97, not like just under $20 to work with me. And I pour my heart into this. It's not a high price because I want to give people an opportunity to do this work, especially while the world is so volatile right now. This is a part of way that I'm giving back. So it's a way for you to do this work at a pretty low entry point with someone who actually has extensive experience, knowledge, and expertise in helping people with nervous system regulation. So I highly recommend you check that out. If you join my email list, which you can do in the description or comment, if you join that, a lot of times I'll send out a 50% off coupon code so you can get the challenge for $9.97. So that's a possible option if that interests you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. Take care.